All right. And welcome back to the First and Goal podcast. My name is Lewis, and next to me, as always, is my beautiful co-host, Laraib, as we have another great week of NFL football to recap and review. Laraib, before we hop into anything, you want to say anything?
No, just Lewis, another weird week of NFL football. A couple big
Weird.
upsets, a lot of good play out of some quarterbacks, a lot of bad play out of some quarterbacks, Lewis. But why don't we quickly hop into our picks from this past week? I finally get my second dub of the season. You saw we were missing out on a couple teams this week from the bye week, and so a little bit low scoring for us, but still, I'm able to pull it up on top. We only disagreed on 3 games this week, Lewis, but Minnesota gets a dub over Miami, and San Francisco didn't
New,
win. And
New
so,
Orleans lost as well.
yeah,
So,
so that was difficult for you. And so now the score is tied or it's 4-2. And I'm excited for next week.
yeah. I gave up a week. I'm just gonna keep giving up weeks here and there, make you feel like we're kind of fighting for something. I'm gonna destroy you this upcoming week, but that's not a part of the case. But we have a huge week to get into, so let's go ahead and let's start talking about our favorite teams, the Saints Seahawks corner. I'll let you start because I like delivering bad news at the end.
Well, my Seahawks at home beat the Cardinals 9-10. And it was a close game at halftime, and I thought it's going to be a really defensive game. But in the second half, Kenneth Walker really gets it going, and he gets a rushing touchdown. We still had some miscues. The only touchdown that the Cardinals had this past weekend was off a block punt, and against the Saints we had that weird punt that we didn't do, which kind of was leading to one of the factors why we lost that game. But this week, what was really the big key thing for me was our two defensive stud corners, Tariq Woolen and Kobe Bryant. Not
Yes,
the Kobe Bryant
sir.
you're thinking about, but Tariq Woolen, 6'4", absolute freak, runs a 4.4. He's just a freak of nature. And then, he has an interception. He's had interception in 4 weeks in a row, Lewis. And Kobe Bryant caused a fumble on Kyler Murray, and Tariq Woolen grabs that fumble. So that's two takeaways from him this week. And I really like this rookie draft class they have going so far, Lewis. Our two stud tackles have been balling out. Our defense got 6 sacks this week, which was great to see. And so all around a great game from our team.
I'm really liking the trajectory of this Seahawks team. And I know it's hard for me to admit that because I have my own team, my own rooting interests. But Tariq Woolen, he's becoming one of my guys. We have a few of them. And I know obviously he's one of your guys because he's a Seahawk. But he's joining the Matt Milano, Jeremy Chin, an esteemed group of our guys. And I'm forgetting one, but you know who you are. But moving it on over to the Bayou, where we welcomed the prince that was promised, Joe Burrow. He came back to his old stomping grounds. Well, not really, but where he won the national championship with him and Jamar Chase. Jamar Chase's old stomping grounds, and it looked like he never left. He had a dominant game. Obviously, no Marshawn Lattimore. And honestly, for the most part, for 80% of this game, the Saints were kind of controlling it. We got good pressure on Joe Burrow and, just from our front four. But then we started blitzing late, and that started getting, because we got the pressure early. Then they started figuring things out, and we couldn't get as much pressure. And then we started blitzing. We had a little bit of success blitzing for a while. And then they started to brutalize us with those one-on-one matchups on the outside. A 60-yard touchdown to Jamar Chase with under 2 minutes left. Pretty much put the nail in the coffin. And the Cincinnati Bengals got the win. I feel pretty good about the Saints as a competitive team. Like every game we watch from the Saints, unless it's against a complete, dominant powerhouse, I think is going to be a competitive game. But this is a team with just all the penalties, the turnovers, that we're not going to win a lot of these really close games, a lot of these teams, but we're going to be competitive. I don't see playoffs in this team's future, but I will say for your sake, Laraib, we'll see what happens with the Seahawks the rest of the season. But the NFC is just crazy in general. So who knows? It's only 6 games. 2-4 is obviously not where you'd like to be, but we'll talk about this Thursday night football game coming up, which is a good chance to get back into the race. But let's go ahead, Laraib, and let's talk about probably the most viewed game from Sunday, the Buffalo Bills taking on the Kansas City Chiefs and winning 24-20. What was your biggest reaction from this game, Laraib?
I think the biggest reaction from everybody in this game, Lewis, is that Josh Allen is by far and clear the MVP so far in the NFL. What he did on that last drive was just absolutely spectacular. That hurdle run that he had, and then just that dart that he threw to Dawson Knox in the corner of the end zone for that touchdown was just amazing. And then Lewis, we were talking about the Bills team a couple of weeks ago that they weren't able to win some of these one-score games, and now they've done it against the Ravens in a big game. Now they just did it against the Chiefs in a big game, and so you really like the trajectory of this team. It was a really close game, back and forth. We thought it was going to be much high scoring than it was, and Josh Allen was able to go out there and just put on an absolute performance.
The addition of Von Miller in the offseason to a lot of people seemed like a wild overpay. And yes, he's productive, but he's on the tail end of his career. And is he worth it? Well, if he was the difference in this game, 6 pressures, 2 sacks, and a key pressure at the end of the game to make Mahomes throw the ball into a tight window that was inevitably picked off. And I'll say these two teams you can just watch the rest of the NFL, and there's the Bills and the Chiefs, and then there's the rest of the NFL. I love the Eagles are definitely the top of that next tier, but these two teams, it just seems like they're on a collision course for the AFC Championship. And the Bills, I think the biggest takeaway from this game is this is a huge step in them, having that game played in Buffalo, whereas, they haven't had much success in the postseason when that game is in Kansas City. So, this was a situation last year as well, Buffalo. So at the same time, they beat Kansas City. They had the lead in the AFC, but then they lose a game at Jacksonville and they kind of take their foot off the gas. Your division is not easy, Buffalo. So you need to take all these games seriously and you need to make sure you clinch that 1 seed because you definitely can. The Jets are looking a lot better. The Patriots have been, on an upward tick. And, the Dolphins, they lost 3 in a row, but they're going to get Tua back. So all these teams in your division are starting to play a lot better football. So you need to make sure that you're on your A game from this point out if you want to play that key game but against that team in your house.
Yeah, Lewis, and then we can flip it on over to the other team, the Chiefs. They're going to take this one on the chin. They're going to move on, right? A close game. Patrick Mahomes was sacked 3 times, had a lot of pressure in his face. Like you mentioned, Von Miller was the one who really was in his face and caused him to throw that last minute interception. And so we know what this Chiefs team is. Patrick Mahomes is going to be Patrick Mahomes, but I still feel like, Lewis, do you agree with me here that they're still missing one more offensive weapon? Juju Smith-Schuster played well this week. We know Travis Kelce is always going to be good, but that ground game, they just weren't able to get it going. A lot of talks about Christian McCaffrey, where he might be going. We saw the Panthers trade Robbie Anderson this morning. They might be shipping off some other players. And so what do you think about the Chiefs offense and maybe bringing in one more guy, or how do you feel about their trajectory so far?
Well, I think it's because you're so used to this team being so elite on third down. And this season just has not been the Kansas City standard. They're still in the top half of the league, but you always expect them to be in the top 5, if not the best third down team in the entire league, just because you have Andy Reid and you have Patrick Mahomes. And, just that extra threat on third down, I agree with you. They could definitely use just like we thought Juju Smith was going to be, and he had a pretty good game on Sunday, but just that 3rd and 8, across the middle, whether it be, running back on a cross route, or it be just, maybe another option at a tight end, like a better tight end too, just to, kind of help Kelce out in the running game. Also, just that extra seam target. But I don't know. I think the biggest thing for the Chiefs that's going to help them is their secondary was just decimated by injuries. But you hope that they're going to get these guys back, especially if these two teams do meet again. And you saw when the Bills weren't really getting anything going offensively, they just started targeting that corner. And he had a few good plays in the game, but letting up 2 touchdowns to Diggs and Davis, what are you going to do? And that kind of got the Bills energized and allowed them to come back and win this game. So I think the Chiefs are going to be fine. They just need to make sure they get their guys back, and their division is looking very winnable. So as long as they can keep this going, win their division, they're going to be in a prime spot. And I think these two teams are definitely going to meet again in some type of AFC playoff.
Yeah, for sure, Lewis. But moving on to another topic that we have from week 6, the NFC East, Lewis. Is this the best division in football in your opinion? The Giants are 5-1, the Cowboys are 4-2, and of course the Eagles are 6-0. So how do you feel about this division for the rest of the season, especially with Dak Prescott coming back and Brian Daboll look two Coach of the Year candidates in this division?
It's so weird to think about that we'd be, after week 6, talking about the NFC East potentially being the best division in football. Because look, before the season, you were like, maybe the Eagles make the playoffs. the Cowboys have suffered a lot of injuries, and the Giants and Commanders were pretty much written off. And well, the Commanders are living up to expectation, but the Giants
Your
are by
Commanders.
far, yeah, we're off that. We're off that. Carson Wentz is out for 6 weeks. They're not my team anymore until he comes back. So, hey, but Sam Howell, who knows? We might see a baby Carson Wentz come in, but that's besides the point. The biggest surprise is definitely the New York Giants sitting at second in this division. Their only loss coming at the hands of the Dallas Cowboys on a Monday night. So it's really interesting. And how many times are we going to doubt the Giants? And are they going to make us look stupid? I mean, we picked against them when they played Baltimore. We picked against them when they played Green Bay, and they just kept coming and they kept winning. And or dare I say, this is a legitimately good team that if you look at the rest of their schedule, they could win 11 games. Like it's not hard to see going through the schedule. I don't have the schedule in front of me at the moment, but they have an easy path, but so do the Eagles and so do the Cowboys. That you could potentially see 3 playoff teams coming from this division. So I've been very impressed. Obviously, the Eagles, we've given them all the credit they need. They're undefeated. They took care of business against the Cowboys. But even if you're a Cowboys fan, you should feel pretty encouraged about that game because Cooper Rush, as admirably as he played, and as much as we tried to, entertain ourselves with a quarterback controversy, it was always going to be Dak. And if anything, this game was pretty good for Dak because now no one's going to complain if he has a bad game to bring Rush in because he looked pretty bad this game. So when Dak comes back, I think this offense is going to start clicking. And to see how competitive that game is without Dak just gets you excited for the future matchup when they play in Dallas on Christmas Eve.
Yeah, and another thing about the Cowboys, Lewis, they could have easily packed it in at halftime when they were down big. We know Mike McCarthy, he's always standing on the sideline. It looks like he has a coach's seat in front of him, Lewis, but it's really just the Denny's menu. But credit to those players and credit to that coaching staff. They really didn't give up in that one, and they battled all the way to the end, even when they were down big. And so you like to see that, especially CeeDee Lamb. He had a really difficult matchup with those 2 corners. And we saw some flashes, and we saw, Michael Gallup was open on some throws that, Dak Prescott will hopefully make those. So I'm really excited, just like everyone else, to watch them on Christmas Eve, Lewis. And then talking about the Giants a little bit, in 4 games, they've been down by double-digit points, and they came back and won those games. And so we really like their schedule moving forward. But I don't know how sustainable that is, that, you're always going down big and having to crawl back in these games. I know Daniel Jones has done an admirable job. No turnovers. He's just been balling out. Saquon Barkley looks like he's going to be the comeback player of the year. But you really have to question, with no receiver threats, with Daniel Jones, how he's been playing well, but we know how he can be, and so you like them to make the playoffs, Luce. You like a lot of these teams in the NFC East to make the playoffs, but you just have to question, what type of firepower this Giants team have going into the for the rest of the season, especially with, Wan'Dale Robinson, rookie is good, but you talk about all the injuries they've had, and Kadarius Toney, Sterling Shepard. And some of these guys, Kenny Golladay has been absent, despite the $72 million that he stole from New York Giants. And so what do you feel about this offense, Lewis?
You know what? I heard something, and it did make me think. This does remind me a lot of just those heavy running teams from the 2000s, where if you look at the league nowadays, there's not a lot of great quarterback play. I can't name 10 quarterbacks who are playing good football right now. I mean, there's guys who should be playing good football who are, we call them good quarterbacks who are just not. Coming to mind, Stafford, Rodgers, Brady, other quarterbacks also that I just can't mention at the moment. But in this league, it's honestly coming down to running the ball and good defense. That's why you're seeing teams like the Giants, the Patriots who've been playing better, the Jets who've been playing really well. These teams are just coming back and they're playing really good football because they're winning time of possession and they're not turning the ball over that much because of the run game. And they're getting all these other quarterbacks off the field, and they make those quarterbacks pressured to. There's something to be said about getting your defense a break. And even if you're a high running team, if you have a 12-play drive and you just get 3 points, your defense is going to be energized and ready to go. But you have other offenses like in the Bengals, for example, very quick scoring, very high octane, but their defense just cannot get a rest. So it's always going to end up in a shootout. You play these, muck it up games with Daniel Jones and Saquon Barkley. They can win games, That's why it's not far-fetched to say they can make the playoffs. However, I will say I agree with you that there is a definite ceiling because this style of football is not going to get you very far, especially in the playoffs when it comes to facing an elite offense or elite quarterback. You just cannot match scoring in these scenarios. And I don't think their defense is that elite to consider them like a 49ers type team from a few years ago or for the past few years. So I love the story. I love Brian Daboll. I think, it's always super exciting when you have a new coach just preach what he's been saying all offseason and you see it. You see everything that's been changing, and especially for a fan base like the Giants, who they've been so used for the longest time to really good coaching, always being prepared. But in the last 10 years, they've had to deal with Joe Judge, Bob McAdoo, and all this incompetence. So it's so nice for the Giants to finally have a true captain under the helm. But to answer your question, I think the best division in football is actually the AFC East. And I'm not just standings watching, but I've really been impressed with the Patriots recently. The Jets are 4-2, and I think they're better than the Giants. That defense the Jets has, they're young, they're fast, they're hungry, and they play their butts off. And then, of course, you have the Bills, who are the best team in football, and the Dolphins are a good team. So it's not like that Commanders anchor weighing down the division like the NFC East. But just the fact that the NFC East is in this discussion says a lot about those top three teams.
Yeah, it really does, Lewis. And then the Eagles, of course, you know how good they are. But thinking about some of these better teams or the better divisions, Lewis, sometimes the NFC West, we've seen how far they've fallen. The AFC West was supposed to be really good this season, but we know
AFC North as well. I think that's where you were thinking about, and they haven't been that great either. The top two teams in that division are 3-3, and the NFC South is a complete dumpster fire with Atlanta at number 2. So all these other divisions who we think are pretty good have been not that great this season, except for the two East divisions. We'll see how that goes for the rest of the year. But speaking of some of the top teams or the believed top teams in the NFL, Rob, the Packers and the Buccaneers suffered mind-blowing upsets on Sunday. The Packers, who were 7-point home favorites, lose to the Jets by 17 points. And maybe more indefensible was the Buccaneers, who were over 10-point favorites going into that game against Kenny Pickett and probably what we call the worst team in football, and lost. So who's in more trouble, and can either of these teams get out of it, Laraib?
Well, I just want to start this off by saying both of these games really hurt our wallets this past weekend. The wallet is feeling a little extra light. But, Lewis, I think I have to be more worried for the Packers in the situation. We know how well the Jets have been playing. I think they have a really high shot of having the defensive rookie of the year and the offensive rookie of the year, and Sauce Gardner and Breece Hall. But that's just inexcusable for the Packers at home. And it's really been a lack of, effort from Aaron Rodgers, in my opinion. It really looks like with Devontae Adams exiting, he's kind of just packed it in. He got his money this offseason, and he's on his ayahuasca, and that's it for him. He hasn't built any connection throughout this whole season. We thought, okay, week 1, they lose to the Vikings, but you saw some flashes out of Dobbs, you saw some flashes out of Watson. They're going to build on this, but I haven't seen any of that, Lewis. We didn't see any of that last week against the Giants when they lost in London. I didn't see any of it this week when they just got blown out by the Jets. And so, there's just a lack of effort from Aaron Rodgers, him just being lazy. We know the pedigree of this coach and how well this Packers have played in the past 3 seasons, giving 13 wins in all 3 seasons. But really looks like Aaron Rodgers is packing it in my opinion, Lewis.
It's hard not to say it's an effort thing, because in all these games in which they can't get out to a huge lead, and we've been on this since the beginning of the season before they played a single game, is when Aaron Rodgers sees defeat, the ship is sinking, he jumps in the water. He jumps in the first lifeboat, and he is gone with the women and children. He's not a fighter, and he's never been, but he's great when he's up 13 against the Bears. Oh, he's the MVP of the league. So this season, maybe it is just he's mellowed out and doesn't really care anymore, even though you're making $50 million and you're the sole reason why your best receiving target is off the team. And this offense, there's not a single receiver with over 300 yards. It's just been underperforming. The running game couldn't get going, and you lose by 17 to the New York Jets. And honestly, Laraib, the Jets looked like the better team on the field. I don't think if that game was played 10 times, the Jets win 7 of them. That's how bad I think the Packers look right now. And as for the Buccaneers, the only saving grace for the Buccaneers right now is the god awful division they're in with yours truly. But the Buccaneers, the the offense looks so bad right now, and it's confusing to me why that's the case. Leonard Fournette is playing pretty well. You have Godwin back. You have Evans. I think the thing for Brady is he needs that safety blanket tight end, and he's always had it with Gronk. And you see Cameron Brate leave the game with a head injury, and that safety blanket just to help him in the pass protection. You saw him screaming at his offensive line. Well, Brady, you need to get the ball out faster because he's so used to those quick reads, the quick seams, and the defense kind of has to push back of it. But they were blitzing Brady, the Steelers were, and they were finding success. You've never heard of this in Brady's career. I think the Buccaneers are in a position to get it fixed, and their high-end talent is still talented enough to make them a threat in the NFC. But as of right now, Laraib, both these teams are very troubled, and the Packers, you saw the Minnesota Vikings, they're 5-1. They have 2.5 games on you in the division because they beat you in week 1. I don't think they're catching the Vikings, Laraib, and they might miss the playoffs.
Yeah, they really might, Lewis. But like we said, their schedule is really easy. Like you're saying, Aaron Rodgers, if he's already off the boat.
What's easy? We thought this game was easy. There were 7-point favorites at home, and they got blown out. Throw away the damn schedule at this point if you're the Packers, because there's no more gimmies. You are now a gimme if you keep playing this brand of football because you have no offensive production, and this defense has been mediocre. So what's a gimme? All these games they play, Laraib, if I see them as a 7+ point favorite against anyone not in Chicago, I am slamming the other team.
Detroit.
No,
Lewis, but I want to talk about this Bucs defense a little bit. We can, the offense, of course, everybody's looking at Tom Brady. He's yelling at the offensive line. He's in New York for Robert Kraft's wedding. But I want to talk about the defense, Lewis. They're playing against a rookie quarterback in Kenny Pickett, and he's still balling out. Okay. And then you injure him, and Mitch Trubisky comes in, and he's converting 3rd and longs, not 3rd and manageables, not 3rd and ones, 3rd and 15s, 3rd and 14s. Chase Clownpool is getting big catches, and this defense, another thing built on their pedigree, right? They won a Super Bowl a couple years ago. We know how hard hitting they are. We know how that front 7 is with all those playmakers, but you just keep on giving up first downs and first downs and first downs. You give up a big kickoff return to the Steelers, and so this team has a lot to work on, Lewis. It really does.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. Both these teams need to do a lot of soul searching to figure out if they can get back to the pedigree that their teams hold. But let's move on to the other, not as talked about division in the NFC, despite having some of the best teams and rosters in the NFC, and that is your lame division, the NFC West. The 49ers give up a weird game in Atlanta. Honestly, they melted down more, and I didn't even know what happened in that game. I wasn't paying attention. I thought the 49ers were a shoo-in, and then Atlanta just whoops them by 2 scores. Meanwhile, the Rams, I guess they won the default game that was thrown on their schedule against the Panthers with Robbie Anderson storming out. He just got traded to the Cardinals. And then speaking of the Cardinals, they just looked awful. And we talked about the Seahawks. Are the Seahawks the best team in this division? I don't know what to think of this division right now, Laraib.
Yeah, I think for the 49ers, some of those injuries have really caught up to them, Lewis. You talk about Elijah Mitchell has been gone for a little bit, but Joey Bosa didn't play in this game. Trent Williams is gone for some time. Emmanuel Mosley, their star cornerback, he's out. And so the injuries, Lewis, I think they're finally starting to stack up for this team. Another, back-to-back road game on the East Coast playing in Atlanta. So that was difficult for them. And they were just getting gashed on the ground, Lewis. And I said this in our predictions. Jimmy Garoppolo has one of those signature games where he has 2 picks and they have a fumble on the ground. And, it just goes the other way for the 49ers in this one. I still like them for some of their players to come back and see how they go from there, Lewis. But this division is really winnable. I think the Cardinals, they're the worst in the division. I think we can both agree on that. But they still have some talent. D-Hop is coming back this week. And for the Rams, they get a win finally. Allen Robinson had a touchdown. He looked really good. At least live up to some sort of expectation in that game, but their offensive line has been struggling a lot. And so I think this division is wide open, Lewis. And for my Seahawks, they've scored the most points in this division, but they've also given up the most points in this division. So it's a double-edged sword on that one. If we can get something together, I'm hoping for a playoff push for my team.
I mean, it's not far-fetched to say that right now, Laraib, looking at this whole division. Now, you obviously have the most faith in the 49ers and the Rams because they've showed us what they're capable of. But as far as, we're 6 games in, the most capable team looks like your Seahawks right now. So we'll see what happens. The 49ers did put the beat down on y'all when they all played in week 2. So we'll see what happens when those matchups start happening in the future. But, there is definitely concern. And now with the Rams losing their left tackle, Joseph Nopum, who had his own problems, trying to replace Andrew Whitworth, that's just another key injury to this Rams offensive line, which really makes their season look very susceptible right now. So we'll see what happens with them. But I'm very excited for this next segment, Laraib. We are debuting our top 5 teams in the NFL as of week 6. And I didn't give you much when I brought this topic up to you. I didn't give you parameters or what we'd be judging it on. For me, it's who are the top 5 teams that you just would not want to play. And they've shown, regardless of standings, these are the top 5 most talented teams in the NFL. I don't know how you attacked it, but I think you maybe went on a similar route. But I'll let you go ahead, unveil your top 5 teams, and then we can debate afterwards.
All right, Lewis, I feel like we definitely have at least these 3 in our top 3, maybe not in the same order, but the Bills, Eagles, Chiefs in order 1, 2, 3 for my top 3. And to round out the list, Cowboys at 4 and Vikings at 5. I know you and I were going to get into that a little bit about the Vikings and Cowboys, but why don't you list off your top 5?
So when we talked earlier, I did make an amendment to my top 5. I removed one team and added another, but our top 3 is the same, except I do have. So I have Buffalo 1, I have KC 2 ahead of Philadelphia 3. At number 4, I still have Baltimore, and at number 5, I have Dallas. So I actually put Dallas back in. That was my change. My argument for the Vikings is they're 5-1 with 0 quality wins. They had that one game in week 1 against the Packers, which, they got up for. I guaranteed that all preseason. It was the perfect time slot for Kirk Cousins. All the stars aligned, and they beat the Packers. Great for them. Besides that, they have not looked impressive in any of these games. And you just saw on the last week, they got by this Dolphins team. It was just a really messy game, and they were just bailed out by so many bad penalties from the Dolphins on offense. Teddy Bridgewater could just not get out of his own way. Every huge completion that they would connect on, there'd be a holding penalty bringing it back. So it was just one of those games where they really got out by the skin of their teeth. Now, they had been finding ways to win, so credit to them for being 5-1, and they're, standings-wise, they're one of the best teams. But I just can't put them over a Baltimore or Dallas, who I've seen win big games, and the capability, I've seen them capable in some of these games to where if these teams played, I just would not pick the Vikings in those matchups.
Yeah, I want to talk about the Ravens a little bit, Lewis. They've blown some big leads, and I don't know how you can trust them. When they lose to the Bills, they lose to the Vikings they lose to the Dolphins after going up big, and they're up big in this game, and they end up losing this one. And so we both really liked Lamar to start the season. He was on a historic pace with the touchdowns, with a few interceptions, the passing, and all that stuff. But these past couple of weeks, Lewis, I've seen him falter. And we've seen John Harbaugh. He's had a great connection with Lamar, but I really don't know at 3-3 when their wins have only come against the Bengals, the Patriots, and the Jets. Those are good teams, okay teams. The Jets week 1, I don't know if they're at the same level that they are now.
Nah, they had Joe Flacco week 1. You can throw that one out.
Right. They play the Patriots. They play the Patriots, and Mac Jones, he throws a bunch on them. And they're still able to win that game. And then they beat the Bengals last week, in prime time, which is a close game with Joe Burrow, but divisional game. And so I don't like what I see out of this team so far, Lewis, at 3-3, especially when you're on the road and you think, okay, we're a run heavy team, right? We're playing against the Giants, so have a big lead. We're going to chill the clock. We're going to be able to, ground and pound, but they just haven't been able to do that this season. It's just been Mark Andrews and Lamar Jackson trying to carry this offense. And they really, they've been struggling the past couple of games.
I understand your hesitation with the Ravens, and there is hesitation on my part as well. But I just think the last matchup against the Giants, it was a really good matchup for the Giants. And we didn't bring it up in our preview, but going up against their former defensive coordinator in Wink Martindale, he had a perfect plan for Lamar. And you're right, it was very head scratching why you're up by 4 and Greg Roman decides to run the ball and you just botch a snap. It gets, you throw, and then you have to throw a pick in the end. So it was definitely not it was a very sloppy game for Lamar. But I have faith in him and I have faith in Harbaugh, and their schedule does lighten up. So I think that this team has the pedigree to show. And I think, I'm thinking of these teams as if they played. And I don't know. I really like the Ravens. I like what they have. It's very matchup dependent, and they definitely need another weapon on the outside. And whether that be OBJ or I don't know where they're going to find it, because right now it's just that lack of that consistent outside threat is really hurting them, because you can't throw the ball to Mark Andrews in every single play in the NFL. It's just impossible.
Right. And then we both have the Cowboys there to round out the list. I know we really like that defense. I think Marco Parsons is at plus 100 odds right now. The next guy is plus 850 for defensive player of the year. And so that looks like a lock almost.
Yeah.
In my opinion, almost, basically a lock.
Basically.
And then with Dak Prescott coming back, Michael Gallup has been back for 2 weeks. We both really like how this team is going to start rounding out, heading into the, deep into the latter half of the season. And with the Eagles, a really close game. You let Cooper Rush crawl back in that one, but it was really those 2 stud corners who we know can just lock down 2 top receivers on any given Sunday. And so that's going to be really good to see those team match up later on the season and how they just progress. And there's some more difficult games going on later.
Yeah, we definitely believe in Dallas. And I think, how this NFC East shakes up is going to be super entertaining for the next few weeks. And, we'll see what happens. But to conclude our episode, Laraib, we are going to hop in to the Thursday night football preview, where it is my New Orleans Saints traveling to the desert in Arizona to face the Cardinals. Big thing in this game, Cardinals favored by 1.5 at home. No Marquise Brown because he hurt his foot. However, you get back Mr. DeAndre Hopkins from his suspension. He comes back to play the Saints. And for the Saints, no Lattimore, no Thomas, no Landry, potentially Chris Olave. We'll see. What am I supposed to make of either of these teams, Laraib? Because I've seen both these teams look like probably the worst teams in the NFL. And I've also seen them have miraculous games and great comebacks. So is this just throw the ball in the air and whoever turns it over more loses? It's hard for me to predict.
Well, Lewis, this Cardinals team could very easily be 1-5. I know right now they're sitting at 2-4. They had that great comeback win against the the Raiders. But this team has been really lackluster, Lewis. We know Cliff Kingsbury and Kyler Murray, they always like to get out to these big starts to the start, to begin the season, and they just really haven't been the same, Lewis. You talk about injuries to the running back and James Robinson, he's been banged up. Marquise Brown, like you just mentioned, he's going to be out for this, for maybe potentially for the rest of the season. But you get DeAndre Hopkins back, and that's going to be a good connection for him and Kyler to build on. You know how well they've been playing the past couple of seasons. But I really like the Saints in this matchup, Lewis. That front seven has been still good. Like you said, they've been really competitive in games, right? And on a short week, you're traveling all the way to the west, almost to the West Coast to play the Cardinals in prime time on Thursday night. But I think this is going to be a really low scoring game. The unders have been really common in some of these Thursday night games. And I like the Saints to pull out a really close one. If Alvin Kamara, he keeps on playing the way he's been playing and get Taysom Hill more involved. I didn't like how they utilized him last week compared to what they did when they were playing the Seahawks. If they can get some of that going, then I like the Saints team, Lewis.
I just think it was they wanted to get Kamara more involved, and most defenses know what to prepare for when they play against Taysom, except for the Seahawks, I guess. I don't know, Laraib, because there's some things in my Saints bias that are saying go with the Cardinals. This is a classic, you get screwed type game, but there's just been a lot of noise with this Cardinals team. It just a lot of, I don't know, finger pointing, blaming. The coach just seems confused. Kyler Murray is not a leader whatsoever. That there's just so many red flags, and they think, oh, when Hopkins comes back, our season is saved. Not really. I mean, he's injury prone on his own right, and is he the same receiver that we've seen for the past few years? we'll have to see in this game. But I agree with you, Laraib. I think the Saints are starting to establish an identity of just being a power running team. They tried doing that against the Bengals. They just could not keep the Bengals off the field in third down. But I think this Cardinals offense is just so sporadic, so wishy-washy that if the Saints have this consistent plan on their offensive side, they can get it done. Unless Jameis is playing, then I will definitely be picking against the Cardinals. But I am under the assumption that Dalton is starting another game for the Saints. So I will be picking the Saints in this one. Give me the Saints. I think it is going to be lower scoring. I agree with you. I'm going to go 20 to Cardinals 16.
Yeah, Lewis. And one more thing about the Cardinals, last week offensively they only put up 3 points. Against a bottom 5 Seahawks team, which has given up the almost bottom 5 in points allowed, and you only put up 3 points. The other 6 came from a block punt. So I think they're going to struggle in this game against the Saints defense. And so give me the Saints 17-16 on the road, picking up a win.
All right, and that's going to do it for today's episode. Make sure you check out all of our socials in the link below. And besides that, we have another great episode coming at you later in the week, so do not miss that. A bunch of more great games to discover. And if you made it this far, like, subscribe, share it. We love all your support. And Laura, anything else before we head out?
I think this is a First and Goal podcast signing off.
Peace.